This video is now in session, and today we will talk more about Biden's infrastructure plan and more specifically the pushback it has been getting from Republicans. Over the past couple of days, Republicans have said that this infrastructure plan barely deals with infrastructure itself. They say that less than 50% of the eventual bill will be infrastructure. Meanwhile, Democrats, particularly progressive Democrats, say that the infrastructure does not go far enough, that there should be more social programs that go under infrastructure. And as a result, we're now having a debate as to whether infrastructure should include only roads, bridges, and highways, or if it should also include social programs, energy, broadband, and manufacturing. And the short answer is neither definition is completely correct, but I'll explain why later on. But let's first talk about why Republicans are deciding on this kind of strategy as an opposition to the Democrats' bill. So the Republicans know that just like the COVID bill, they can't really attack the bill on the substance, mainly because if we look at the substance, almost all of it is supported by Americans. Almost everything, actually everything in there, including stuff that is not infrastructure, according to Republicans, is supported by Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, which is just like the COVID bill. Thus, it would be insincere for Republicans to say we should not invest in broadband because broadband is bad. That's not they wouldn't bring up that argument because, first of all, it alienates their core voter base, which is rural voters who really benefit, who are those who benefit from broadband, and then also they support broadband themselves. And that's not a kind of strategy that they should be bringing on where they flip-flop on different policies. And that's why they really have a trouble. That's why they've had trouble going against this kind of bill. Compared to 2009 with the Affordable Care Act, it had very obscure provisions that were not quite popular with Americans, and the general bill was pretty confusing, which led a lot of people to be in opposition of the Affordable Care Act, and that led to Democrats losing seats in the House and as well as in the Senate. But right now, with this infrastructure bill, it's not quite so obscure, and it's pretty popular with Americans. So what Republicans are trying to do is they're trying to make it seem obscure by saying that most of the bill is not even related to infrastructure. And it definitely sounds like a catchy head title, right? Like 20% of this bill, 20% of an infrastructure bill only deals with infrastructure. The other 80% doesn't. And Mitch McConnell said that this infrastructure bill was a Trojan horse with liberal ideas tucked into the infrastructure bill. So, and he's partially correct in that in that a lot of parts in this bill do not relate to infrastructure. Republicans should definitely not go as far as saying broadband and energy should not go under infrastructure, but I would say though that that infrastructure would not include social programs that help families, elderlies, and children. I don't think that infrastructure is quite that way. It doesn't. It does directly benefit infrastructure, but it isn't infrastructure itself. But for manufacturing, for energy, for pipes, for anything that you can practically build, that all relates to infrastructure. It's like the affordable housing, that all relates to infrastructure. And social programs in some ways indirectly relates to infrastructure to then benefit it. But it's not infrastructure in and of itself. That said, Republicans are completely incorrect and misguided in their definition of infrastructure, as let's just look at their previous comments of what falls under infrastructure. Before this plan, they said that broadband follows under infrastructure. They were in wide support of broadband, but now that a Democratic president has laid that on the table, they now are a lot less they now think that broadband does not follow under infrastructure. They also don't think that pipes follow infrastructure, which is also completely wrong. Again, their definition is roads and bridges, which is an incredibly narrow and 1950s definition of infrastructure. Infrastructure has kept on changing over the decades, especially with our computing technology growing and growing in terms of its capabilities. So now infrastructure also includes cloud computing and as well as software infrastructure. Again, anything that you can build relates almost definitely relates to infrastructure. So that is the kind of strategy that Republicans are bringing on, which is to make the bill look obscure, and then from there try to criticize the bill without saying what is actually inside the bill. And that's that's kind of the best strategy that they have. That involves opposition to the bill. Republicans at this point, no matter what, are going to oppose Democratic bills, even if they are very popular. That said, it's not a good strategy in this specific instance for Republicans to go against this bill, which is a very, very popular bill, especially when Democrats only need 50 votes in the Senate to pass this bill, as the Senate parliamentarian has ruled that this infrastructure bill can fall under reconciliation. It's not a good idea. The better idea for them is to support it and then take credit for it. Say that we allowed a bipartisan bill to be passed. We were the ones that did it, not Democrats. Now, obviously, they can't take credit for actually making the bill, but they can take credit for helping to pass this bill in a bipartisan way, and that would at least give them some of the credit. That said, when you go heavily against a bill that is very popular among Americans, it gets very hard for Republicans to actually persuade Americans to switch. They have to persuade their own voters that this infrastructure bill is not good, even though almost every single one of the provisions inside the bill are popular. So ultimately, I see this going in a similar way as the COVID-19 bill, just a little bit less bipartisan and a little bit more of the usual politics, where Joe Manchin defies the Democrats and opposes the bill without watering down a lot of it. So he already says that he wants to water down the 28% corporate tax rate to 25% instead of 21% as it currently is, which has received a lot of pushback from Democrats. But honestly, there's not much Democrats can do. They are just going to have to either heavily negotiate with Joe Manchin or simply accept it, because he is a Democrat from West Virginia. And ultimately, it was the Democrats' fault for getting only 50 seats in the Senate and having to rely on conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.